Okay, good morning, Hazaka Baruch, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful Sunday morning as we are getting ready for the holiday of Purim, one of our favorite holidays. Woo! Okay, beautiful, fantastic. Today's class is sponsored anonymously for the Refuah Shlema of all of Am Yisrael. Today's class is also sponsored Leilu Nishmat Yosef ben Avraham Ashri Shirei Adonai Ved Misvadav Chayes Me'od Tov Shem Shem Tov V'yam HaMavet V'yam HaDoa Merachem Kol B'yotav V'yachos V'yachmo V'yirachem Al Nefesh Ruach HaNeshama Shel Yosef ben Avraham Ruach Adonai Tanihenu Began Eden Hu V'chol B'nei Yisrael HaShochvim V'mo B'chamim V'sedichot V'chen Yehi Ratzon V'nomar Amen. Sponsored by Maurice and Lenore Adis. Hazak Baruch, Oli Besorot Tovot for you and your families and all of Am Yisrael. If anyone would like to sponsor a class, please email us info@ejsny.org. Okay, Rabotai, here we go. As we get ready for the holiday of Purim, I'd like to share with you an amazing, powerful thought that I think will not only shed light into the holiday, but really give us an appreciation of something that we can carry with us throughout the entire year. What I'm going to share with you today is primarily from Rabbi Bernstein on the holiday of Purim. If you didn't get your Purim book yet, not sure what you're waiting for. Purim's right around the corner, just a few days left. So make sure you go out and purchase your sefer, your books, to get ready, to get prepared for this amazing, fantastically powerful holiday of Purim. Rabbi Bernstein over here, he shows us something very powerful, a similarity that exists between the holiday of Purim and something that happened many years earlier. We know that there's a concept called Ma'aseh Avot Siman Abanim. What that means is, whatever happened to the patriarchs happened to their descendants. Anything that happened to the descendants, there has to be a precedent for it earlier in time, somewhere in the blueprint of our making as a nation, somewhere by the story of our avot. Anything that happened. So as an example, as a Jewish nation, we were in Egypt, we were in Mitzrayim. Well, it has to be that one of our patriarchs, that similar story happened to them individually as a microcosm. And we know, of course, it happened to Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu went to Israel, but there was a famine, so he went down to Egypt. Then Paro took his wife. Then God gave Paro plagues throughout the night. And then Paro sent Avraham with a lot of money. That happened in a much longer version many years later with the Jewish people. The Jewish people went down to Mitzrayim because of a famine. Paro started abusing us. Then God sent plagues. And then we left with a lot of money. This is called, again, Ma'aseh Avot Siman Labanim. Whatever happened to the forefathers is going to be a omen that it's going to happen to the children. Well, if that's the case, we must ask the question. It begs the question, especially in the time of year that we are in, where is the Ma'aseh Avot for the holiday of Purim? Where do we find similar ideas in the story that set the stage for the story to happen later on? Where does Purim happen to the Avot? Matter of fact, the Gemara answers this question. If we turn quickly, the Gemara tells us, I believe in Masechet Megillah, Gemara says, going back to the story of Yosef and his brothers. We know that Yosef didn't tell his brothers that he's Yosef in the beginning. He may believe he was just a random viceroy. Very good, very good. And the Pasuk says, Lekulam natan la'ish halifot smalot. He gave everyone a suit or a robe or a piece of clothing. Ul Binyamin natan hamesh halifot. But when it came to his brother Binyamin, Yosef gave 5. And of course the Gemara says, are you out of your mind? If shar davar shenitzta'er bo oto tzadik, could it be the very matter that caused Yosef all his aggravation? Yosef, why are you in Egypt? Why were you sold as a slave? How did this whole mess begin? Why were you torn from your father's lap? Because your father gave you one extra robe. And the Gemara learns, by the way, that a person should never show favoritism to one child over the others. A lot of times we have to give a little bit extra to one kid because he needs it sometimes. Yosef needed it. Yosef was an orphan from his mother. He didn't have really a brother to hang out with. Binyamin was too young. Yosef was all by himself. And Yaakov knows this. Yaakov has to fill the gap. So he gives him a robe. But the Gemara says, big mistake. Big mistake. Never show favoritism to your children. So says the Gemara, if that's the case, Yosef, you didn't learn your lesson. You're not giving Binyamin not 1 extra robe, but 4 extra robes. Everyone else you gave 1 piece of clothing, and to him you give 5. How could it be? And the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet. Answers a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet. Remez Ramazlo, Yosef was alluding to something that was going to take place in the future. that one day he will have a child. Who will emerge from the king's palace with 5 pieces of clothing. He was hinting with these 5 pieces of clothing to Binyamin that he'll have a great grandson who's going to emerge with 5 pieces of clothing. Of course, like it says, Umordechai yatsa milifnei hamelech. We make a song out of it. Umordechai yatsa milifnei hamelech. Right? Mordechai leaves from in front of the king. B'levush malchut techelet vahur. He's going out with all of these pieces of clothing. And if you count, there are 5 pieces of clothing listed. So we see the Gemara is telling us over here, the Maaseh Avot, the first time something happens of the Purim story, nature, actually happened between Yosef and Binyamin. Just like Yosef gave Binyamin clothing, 5 pieces of clothing. So too, Binyamin's great grandson, Mordechai, who was from Binyamin, like the Pasuk says, Ish Yemini, Mordechai from Binyamin, is going to now emerge as well with 5 pieces of clothing. Very interesting a precedent that the Gemara is sharing with us. This is the Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. The truth is, though, this is not the only similarity that exists between the story of Yosef and the story of Purim. Actually, Rabbi Bernstein over here brings no less than 7 similarities and then 4 more textual similarities. So let us go in order. 7 similarities, okay? Feel free to add, if you like, any similarities between the 2 stories of Yosef and Purim, okay? Again, just if you think of something, just write it in the chat. Again, simply, I mean, this is not one of his, but on a very simple level, this is not a good one because every story maybe has this, but both stories involve a king, right? Just start from there maybe, okay? So here we go. Number 1, similarity number 1. Both stories, Yosef and Purim, include a Mishneh Lamelech, a second to the king. Yes, Yosef is Mishneh Lamelech, he becomes second to the king. And of course, we know Haman and even later Mordechai become Mishneh Lamelech, second to the king. Beautiful. Another similarity. In both stories, we find the king takes off his ring and gives it to somebody else to do as he likes. That's not something that we find often. That's something that we find right here. When it comes to Paro, he gives his ring to Yosef. And when it comes to Ahashverosh, he gives his ring first to Haman and then again later to Mordechai. Both stories, number 3, both stories include a king making a very big feast. By Paro, on his birthday, the Pasuk says he made a feast. And by Ahashverosh, of course, we know he made a feast for 180 days, then 7 days. Number 4, both stories have the concept of hen, charm. Both stories, we don't find a lot of hen in the Torah. Okay, but we find Yosef had hen. And who else had hen? Batisa, Esther hen. Esther had hen, Esther had charm. All those that saw her. Number 5, both stories include a forgotten favor. In both stories, there's someone that forgets a favor that was done for them. Of course, in the story of Yosef, we know who that is. Who forgets the favor? Who forgets the favor? The butler. The butler tells, Yosef tells the butler, you're going to come out of here alive if you could just please get me out of here with you. And the butler forgets about him, like the Pasuk says, Vayishkachehu, he forgets him. And of course, in the story of Purim, it was who that forgot? Ahashverosh. Ahashverosh forgot about the favor that Mordechai did for him when he saved his life from Bigtan Vateresh. Okay? Number 6, both stories, the Yeshua, the salvation comes through the king's sleep. With Yosef, it was Paro's dream that quickly caused everyone to rush Yosef out of jail to interpret the dream. And with Ahashverosh, it was his sleepless night that led to the opening of the books and the Mordechai, and the salvation began. Fantastic. And finally, number 7, in both stories, somebody keeps their identity hidden all the way till the end. In Purim, we know that was Esther. And who was it in the other story? Of course, Yosef himself. Yosef doesn't tell that he's Yosef all the way till the end. So this is really powerful stuff, really interesting. Not only that, but we even find similarities in phraseology. Okay, so as an example, in both places we find the phrase Yom Yom, day by day. When it comes to Yosef, Vahi kedabera el Yosef, Yom Yom velo shama aleha. It was as she spoke to Yosef every day, but he didn't listen to her. This is with regards to Potiphar's wife. And what does it say by Esther? Vayhi ke'omram elav yom vayom velo shama alehem. Unbelievable. Yom vayom, every day. They tell Mordechai, why are you not bowing to Haman? Velo shama. Look at the words. Vahi kedabera el Yosef yom velo shama eleha. Vahi ke'omram elav yom vayom velo shama alehem. Mind-blowing. Number 2, both places have very truly incredible. Next phrase, Veyafked pekidim. Both places, the words, Veyafked pekidim. Officers were sent in order to gather something. By Yosef, Veyafked pekidim al haaretz. They sent officers throughout the land. Why? Veyikbetu, to gather et kol ochel, to gather all the food. Because remember, they're preparing for 7 years of famine. And when it comes to Purim, Veyafked al-melech pekidim bechol medinot malchuto. The king sends officers throughout the kingdom in order to gather not produce, but veyikbetzu, same word, veyikbetzu, et kol na'ara betula, every virgin, to see who would be appropriate for the king to marry. Amazing. Veyafked pekidim veyikbetzu, sent officers in order to gather. Another similarity in phrase. Both places have a concept of a person saying, if I lost, I lost forever. Of course, that was Esther. We know she says, Ka'asher avati. If I lose, I'm going to go in. I'm going to go into Ahasuerus, even though I'm not invited. And if he kills me, he kills me. Ka'asher avati. That's what she says. Who says that in the story of Yosef? Who says that? Give it a couple of seconds. It was Yaakov Avinu. When the brothers say we have to go down, but we must take Binyamin with us, they have no choice. Eventually Yaakov, he gives in and he says, okay, Ka'asher shacholti shachalti. Whatever I lost, I lost. Beautiful and incredible stuff. And number 4, final similarity, and this is crazy. There is only one word that appears in 2 places in the entire Tanakh, and that is vayit apak. The word to restrain himself. It only appears in 2 places, you guessed it. It appears by Yosef, when vayit apak, he restrained himself not to reveal his identity to his brothers. And of course, it refers to Haman, when he restrained himself not to get angry, in the beginning at least, when Mordechai would not bow down to him. So again, these are just some examples of similarities that exist between these 2 stories. Really remarkable stuff. And the only question is, we see how they're connected. Question is, why? In what way is the story of Purim have to do with the story of Yosef? Why are they so related? In order to really appreciate this, we're going to have to appreciate and understand that the story of Purim with Amalek and Haman is not only something that happened in Purim. Truly, the first time Amalek enters the scene, before Haman, his predecessor, his great-great-grandpa, when Amalek came to fight us, we're going to see in a moment that it was actually Yosef that was also there. Yosef was also front and center. We know, when it came to fighting Amalek, who was the general? Who fought Amalek? Who led the army? If you answered Moshe, it's not Moshe. I would think Moshe, because we know Moshe led all the other battles. When we fought Sihon, when we fought Og, any battle that we did throughout our journey in the desert all the way till we get to Israel, till his death, Moshe led the battle. Here, all of a sudden, he doesn't lead. Who does he send? Who does he send to fight? To fight Amalek? The Pasuk says he sends Yehoshua, right? Behar lanu anashim v'tzei lahem ba'amalek. Something very interesting. All of a sudden, Moshe is scared for some reason. Why? Why can't Moshe do it? Why does he have to send Yehoshua to fight Amalek? Answers the Midrash. Amar lo, he says to Yehoshua, Zekincha Amar, because your grandpa, who's Yehoshua's grandpa? Yosef. Yehoshua comes from Ephraim, who's the son of Yosef. Your grandpa said, Et Elohim ani yareh, I fear God. And by Amalek it says, Velo yareh Elohim, he doesn't fear God. and therefore Yavo ben Beno, let the great-great-grandson of he who fears come and wipe out and destroy he who did not fear. The Midrash is telling us is that the appropriate person to defeat Amalek has to be someone from the descendant of Yosef. Specifically Yosef, because by Yosef there is an extra element of Yirat Elokim, of a fear of heaven. Something that we need. It's an ingredient that we need if we want to defeat and conquer Amalek, because Amalek, part of their message was they didn't fear God. They didn't accept God in this world. And we need someone that has an extra element, an extra dosage of Yirat Shamayim. And therefore, Yosef's descendant has to be the one to defeat and destroy Amalek. Very interesting. There's only one problem with this. Anyone that prays every morning, that says the Korbanot, should know this problem that I'm about to say. And that is, who else was Yirat Shamayim? Who else had Yirat Shamayim? Who else was Yirei Elokim? Besides Yosef, was there someone else? Maybe? Of course there was. Who? Where does it appear even before Yosef? Who feared God even before Yosef? The answer is Avraham Avinu. When Avraham did the Akedah, what does the Pasuk say? Ata yadati ki yirei Elokim ata. Now I know that you are God-fearing. God says it to Avraham himself. I know now that you are God-fearing. So if Avraham has fear of Hashem, and we need fear of God to defeat Amalek, so then who can we send to fight Amalek? Which Jew would be appropriate to fight Amalek? Any Jew. Any Jew. Anyone from Avraham would be appropriate. They all have in their blood, in their genes, Yirat Elokim. Not only Yehoshua, because he comes from Yosef. Any Jew that you would point to, you would be able to say, you, all of you have Yirat Shamayim. Why? We don't come from Yosef. Forget Yosef. You come from Avraham. You have more important Yirat Shamayim. You come from greater Yirat Shamayim. We don't need only Joshua. We have any Jew will do. And if that's the case, you go back to the question, why does Moshe pick specifically Yehoshua? To understand these questions, to put everything back together, to really appreciate what's going on over here, we have to just for one moment discuss Amalek. And what did Amalek want? What was Amalek's philosophy? What did Amalek believe? Amalek, and this is what they felt, this is what they thought. Amalek said, you only have to observe when you're at home. You're only obligated, you're only bound by your contract. You're only limited to the Torah when you're in the land of Israel. In Israel, yes, ala aini wa ala rasi, on my head, of course, you should keep Torah mitzvot, you should be religious, keep kosher, keep Shabbat, pray, tefillin, keep to the times. When you're in Israel, when you're home, when you're in your comfort zone, but when you travel, when you're away, when you're kicked out of Israel, when you're here in Shushan, when in Shushan, do as the Shushans do. That's what Amalek wanted. Amalek wanted that we should be like a chameleon. We should be able to camouflage and to be like the nation that's hosting us. Wherever we are. If we're in Israel, that's a holy place, so be holy. And if we're not in Israel, and if we traveled away from Israel, if we left home, there's no reason to be religious. You could drop your guard. Let your guard down a little bit. That's what Amalek believed. And by the way, the Pasuk says such. Where does Amalek fight us? The Pasuk says, he comes, Asher Karecha, he comes and he chances upon us. But it says where? You know where? It doesn't say Bamidbar. It doesn't say in Refidim. It says Baderech. On the road. Because that's what Amalek's strength was. Amalek's philosophy was on the road. When you're away from home, when you're far from home, you no longer need to be religious. You are Baderech, and therefore, be part of us. Incorporate our values and our culture into who you are. And really, in a certain sense, the Jewish people believed this. The Jewish people acted like this. When the Jews were in Shushan, Ahasuerus makes a party, and it's not kosher. The wine's not kosher. And Mordechai says, we can't go. We never go to these parties. In Israel, we didn't. And the Jew says, yeah, but that was in Israel. Now we're far from home. Now we're away. Now we're in Shushan. We have to mingle. We have to do like them. It's okay. This is really what the Jewish people believed. In a way, they opened the door for Amalek. Yeshno am echad mefuzar umforad ben ha'amim. Says Haman, Yeshno, there is a nation that's the Jewish people. But you know what? We could defeat them because Yeshno, Yeshenim, they're sleeping, says Haman. They slept. They a little bit lower. They dropped their guard of the observance of mitzvot. And once we do that, we make way for Haman. We make way for Amalek. You know, it's very interesting. When Mordechai is communicating with Esther about the decrees that were sent out to wipe out the Jews. So Esther, in the beginning, is not sure why is he doing this. So she sends a letter to Mordechai. Ladat mazeh ve'al mazeh. She says to Mordechai, I want to know what's this and what's this. Mazeh ve'al mazeh. And the rabbis in the Gemara are bothered by this phrase, mazeh ve'al mazeh. What exactly is Esther telling Mordechai? What does she want from Mordechai? Why is she saying mazeh ve'al mazeh? The Gemara tells us that she was actually playing code words with Mordechai. This was maybe the first Penn and Teller fool us. You know what she was saying to Mordechai? She was hinting to him. She couldn't say it maybe verbally because they didn't know she was Jewish. But she's hinting to Mordechai, mazeh ve'al mazeh. Maybe, just maybe, the Jewish people have violated and have forgotten zeh and zeh. Where do we find that phrase, zeh and zeh, in the Torah? It's found in Parashat Ki Tisa, when Moshe Rabbeinu is about to break the tablets. The pasuk says, when it's describing the 10 commandments that's written on the 10 tablets, mizeh umizeh hem ketuvim. It's written on this side and it's written on that side. Very interesting idea. We know that the luchot weren't written. It wasn't like a piece of paper with writing on it. It was engraved. But it wasn't just engraved. It was engraved mizeh umizeh on both sides. When Moshe showed everyone the tablets, everyone saw the engraving from where they were looking. But guess what? If you were to be standing behind Moshe and you were to be looking from his back at the tablets, you would also see engraving. It was engraved from both sides. Mizeh umizeh. Why was that? Why was that important? What was the message of engraving the tablets on both sides? The Gemara says, you know what it means they were engraved on both sides? They were nikra'im lifnim v'nikra'im bahutz. They were legible on the inside and it was legible on the outside. It's an interesting way to refer to two sides of a piece of stone, inside and outside. I don't know that it's appropriate. If there's a blank piece of wood, I wouldn't call one side inside and the other side outside. I would call them two sides. But I wouldn't say in and out. The Gemara says, no, in and out. The Gemara is alluding to the fact that the Torah must be kept. The luchot and all 613 must be observed. Lifnim, inside of Israel, and bahutz, outside of Israel. No matter where we are. A lot of times we forget this. A lot of times we have certain levels of observance that we're comfortable with. Again, everyone their own level of kosher or of Shabbat. And this is usually what we keep. This is usually what we do. Usually I keep this much. I observe this much. This is where I'm at. Okay, whatever it is, we're growing each to our own level. That's beautiful. But sometimes something happens when we go away, when we travel, when we leave our community and our synagogue and our comfort zone, and all of a sudden, all of our levels of our values, our morality, all of a sudden drops. And we forget where we are. And we rationalize that now that we're bahutz, now that we're away, now that we're outside, it's okay for me to all of a sudden eat things that I usually won't eat. Again, each person according to their own level. It's okay for me to act in certain ways that I would never act. Again, each person according to their own level. And this is really the mentality of Amalek. This is what Amalek tried telling us. This is what Amalek wants from us. Amalek wants us to be observant when we're home. But when we're away, it's okay to drop. It's okay okay to forget. And Esther says to Mordechai, could it be that the Jews have forgotten mizeh umizeh? Could it be that the reason they ate from the party, could it be that the reason that they're all of a sudden lacking in observance, in values, is because they forgot the message of the luchot being written on both sides, that we must be faithful and loyal whether we are inside or whether we are outside. No matter which side we're on of the land of Israel, we must always stay true to our tradition. Could it be they forgot this holy message? And Mordechai, you know what he responds? Vaysaper Mordechai le'Esther kol asher karahu. He tells her everything that happened. What an interesting word, karahu. We should all get goosebumps when we hear that word, because that's the word of Amalek. Karahu. Karecha baderech. Who chanced upon you. It's very interesting. We must ask a question. What is Haman doing in this story? I know it sounds like a weird question, but it's actually a very interesting question. Haman is a descendant of Amalek. Haman doesn't belong in this galut. Haman is what? Where is Haman from? Haman's from Esav. He belongs in the fourth galut of Edom. Haman should be now the galut that we're in. The second galut was the galut of Paras, Persia. Why is Amalek? Why is Haman butting his nose into this exile of Purim? We could say he's in the wrong scene. He's in the wrong chapter. He somehow made his way into this exile. That's not him. Wait your turn, Haman. You're going to come in the fourth exile. That's when you have your chance, your claim to fame. But says Rabbi Bernstein, Haman is here because we let him come. We let him in. By subscribing to their philosophy, by kind of admitting that if we're out of Israel, it's okay to lower our tradition and our observance. That's what Amalek wanted. You think like Amalek, we make room for Amalek. And that's why Haman's in the second galut. Of course, the solution to all of this. Who was the first person that was able to stay true to their tradition, even though they were away from home? Even though they left their comfort zone? Even though they were no longer in Eretz Yisrael? The first time we find it is by Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef is the one who was sold. Yosef is the one who's away from home, and he is tempted. And a Jew of the time of Shushan would have said, listen, in Israel, with my father there, with my family watching me, everyone's there, everyone's going to know. I have to stay true to my values. I'm sorry, Mrs. Potiphar, this is not something that I can do. But in Mitzrayim, everyone's doing it. It's okay. When in Rome, this is what everybody does, this is how everyone acts. I can act like this. I can drop my guard. We're away from our house. Yosef had every reason to give in to Potiphar, but the Pasuk says that he was Yereh Elokim. The advantage, going back to our first question, in what way is Yosef's Yirat Shamayim greater than Abraham's Yirat Shamayim? Is because Abraham had a fear of God, but that was in Har Moriah, that was in Israel, that was in the Temple Mount, that's in the holiest place in the world. To be observant there is nice, but that's not enough to defeat Amalek. Amalek also accepts that. We need to see someone who is able to remain committed to their values and their tradition, even away from Israel. For that, Abraham wasn't enough. For that, we needed Yosef HaTzadik. That's what Yosef taught us. Yosef was able to shine and show us the way to remain connected and committed, even in Egypt, even in the lowest place, even in the Makom HaTum'ah, in the most filthy, impure place in the entire world. This is what Yosef taught us. This is why Yosef is needed to defeat Amalek. This is why Yosef connects to Purim. The Jews of Purim needed to learn from Yosef. Of course, the way Yosef did it is that Yosef remembered one thing. You know, there's many values that we get from our parents. There's many important messages and lessons they teach us. The real question is, are they things that we learned and we hear, but they remain superficial? Or are they values that we actually incorporated into our essence? If they are just imposed, if they are just things that we keep, because we see our parents keep it, but it's not part of me, then very quickly, when I'm no longer home, when I'm no longer in the influence of my parents' house, when maybe I'm somewhere else or in a different age, in a different era, in a different century, in a different decade, when my parents maybe were a little bit outdated, maybe I no longer must observe or stay true to the lessons that my parents gave me because that was for their time, and this is a new time, this is a new place, this is a new era. If it's just something that was imposed on the outside, if it's just like writing letters on a piece of paper, but it's not part of me, then maybe when the test comes, the ink washes off. But when it's like Yosef, Yosef's religion, Yosef's beliefs, Yosef's values weren't just imposed, but he made them part of him. He engraved them. He engraved them just like the letters of the tablets are engraved onto the tablets. Just like Mizeh u'Mizeh, Yosef was able to make his religion part of him. That's what it means when he saw his father in the window. He didn't just see his dad, a reflection of his dad. It means that whatever his father gave him stayed with him forever because it became part of him. And that's why the luchot were not written, but they were engraved. So these are really powerful ideas. Just to close with one amazing Gemara, that's going to really tie it all together. Gemara tells us, Amar le Eliyahu. Says Eliyahu, this is a Gemara, can be found in Masechet Berachot, page 29b. Amar le Eliyahu le Rav Yehuda, ahu ad Rav Salah Hasidah. Eliyahu one time appeared to Rav Yehuda, and he said to him the following. You ready? Very important lessons. Number one, La tirtah ve'la tihteh. Don't get angry and you won't sin. Number two, La tirveh ve'la tihteh. Don't get drunk and you won't come to sin. So far, 2 for 2, very true. And number three, Kshata yotze laderech. When you go out on the road, Himmalech bekonecha ve'yetzeh. Consult with your Creator. What does that mean, consult with your Creator? To say Tfilat Haderech. Gemara is telling us 3 things could cause a person to sin. Anger, inebriation, and a journey, going off on the road. You know what all 3 have in common? What do all 3 have in common? Anger, inebriation, and going off on a journey. In all 3, a person loses sense of where they are. They kind of leave their surroundings. Whether it's with drunkenness or anger, a person forgets his place, forgets where he is, or when we leave, we literally leave where we are. In all 3 scenarios, a person forgets their scenario, their situation. They forget their place. They lose sense of their makom. And in a way, they are yotzeh. They are baderech. What Amalek wanted. And when we are baderech, we're not in our comfort zone. A person could very quickly come to sin. Of course, when it comes to physically leaving our place to a journey, the Gemara says don't go on a journey. It says don't get drunk. It says don't get angry. But when it comes to a journey, it doesn't say don't go on a journey. It says if you're going to go on a journey, because that's something that we have to do. We have to go. We have business. We have vacation. We have to leave. But say Tfilat HaDerech. The function of Tfilat HaDerech, Rabotai, is not only to pray to God for protection, but it's also to remind ourselves that wherever we go, we must take the values of our home with us to stay true to what Yosef HaTzadik taught us, to be able to remain Yerei Elokim, to take God with us on the journey wherever we go. Very interestingly, on Purim, the custom is to drink. The halacha says, Hayav inish levesum. You should drink. Again, we shouldn't get gone and wasted, but we should drink a little bit more than what we're used to. On Purim, what we are trying to do is to stimulate a kind of exodus. We try to take ourselves from inside to outside. We try to leave where we are, and thereby we try to fix the sin of the Jewish people of Purim, so to speak. So we should be zocher always to remember to stay true to whatever our level is, to be able to always stay committed to that level, wherever we are, home or far from home. And by that way, we'll be able to destroy and remove any remembrance of Amalek. Okay, we'll stop over here. Have a wonderful day. God willing, we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.